Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning. I'm Katie Halper, and Monday morning is, of course, when we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to.
And if you're having a bad start to your week, just be thankful that you did not watch the Sunday morning news shows, and we did. So
exactly.
that's something to feel cheerful about.
Very cheerful about. And gratitude is such an important practice. And if you want to give us thanks, you can do that in a couple ways. One is by merely liking the stream. How easy is that? If you're watching right now, just give it a thumbs up. Also, you're in luck because the party does not end right now. We actually have a post-party, after party at Colin that we do right after this. The coolest after party happening before 12 p.m. noon on the entire planet. Also, make sure that you've tweeted this out, everyone. Co-host as well. Not to put you on blast. But, okay, I was going to say you may have already, in which case I'm not putting you on blast. I just put myself on blast for not trusting the co-hosts. So I'm calling myself out, putting myself on notice. And also make sure that you become Substack subscribers or local subscribers. You can do that at usefulidiots.locals.com or usefulidiots.substack.com. Hi, everyone on YouTube. Hi, everyone on Rumble. And you're definitely going to want to do that this week because we have a great interview with Jacob Siegel, who wrote a great piece on disinformation. And he gets into it and addresses the Twitter files. And I ask him what he has to say to the claim that I've heard a lot. I think a lot of people repeat this, which is that there was no censorship revealed in the Twitter files. And as you can tell from the interview, he's a very calm and collected man, cool as a cucumber. And he gets a little bit hot and bothered by this question in the best way. So again,
because it's poppycock. That's why it's poppycock. The idea that there wasn't censorship. There was censorship. So of course he's agitated because I say, it's ludicrous.
Right.
I say we should censor those people who say there's no censorship of the Twitter files. That's what I'm saying.
He has PTSD, poppycock PTSD.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. It's his poppycock. All righty. Should we start with the clips?
Let's start with the clips. And someone who does not have PTSD because he gives us the news every week, calm and collected, is none other than the Chuckster, who's going to recap a really interesting week in Republican politics from abortion to gun control. Or guess which side they're on.
Good Sunday morning. Good Sunday morning. Debates over guns and abortion have roiled this nation for decades. This week, those debates feel a bit more intense than they have in a while. And there are some deepening tensions between...
So I just want to say, what Chuck just said there about his feelings, like the political debate is feeling more intense. Chuck, if you're watching this, I really like this new tack for you where you're telling us about your feelings. I don't trust you to deliver any honest news about the facts. But if you're going to be straight up with us about your feelings, like talk to us about the intensity of how the news is, I welcome that. I think that's cool.
Yeah. It's like it's like when you're talking to someone, you're having a debate or something. It's helpful to say, I feel like when you blah, 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 it makes me feel like,
He's feeling intense and he's sharing it. I like it. I'm with it.
Yeah.
Activists who wield power inside Republican primary circles and the overall electorate. Today marks the 16th anniversary of the Virginia Tech shooting. At the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. 32 people were killed. Now, sadly, it's been surpassed by mass shootings in Las Vegas and Orlando. After 5 people were killed this week in a mass shooting in Louisville, Kentucky, 6 more killed 2 weeks ago at a school in Nashville. 2024 Republican hopefuls gathered at the NRA convention on Friday and rejected the idea that gun restrictions could somehow limit gun violence. And the NRA continued to demand unlimited political allegiance from the GOP.
Gun-hating politicians should never go to bed unafraid of what this association and all of our millions of members can do to their political careers.
The issue is,
how do you think the first draft of that speech went? Do you think he added that part there at the end about their political careers?
Yeah, probably.
That guy's Wayne LaPierre is so scary that I bet the first draft was like, gun-hating politicians should never go to bed unafraid of what we can do to them. And then maybe someone's like, maybe you want to make sure like you're talking about something a bit less threatening.
Right.
Like, all right, fine. How about their political careers?
Yeah. They should never go to bed unafraid of what we can do to them. and how we can blow their heads off.
Exactly.
Oh, I mean, sorry, what we can do to their political career. Sorry, did I say that out loud? Yeah. That was Wayne LaPierre probably reading his first draft. He was really scary.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's not too many guns. The issue is too many thugs, hoodlums, and savage criminals on our street.
Little Miss Addie.
So Trump says the problem is not too many guns. There's too many thugs and hoodlums and savage criminals. Okay, but like, what if savage criminals such as mass shooters can get the guns?
Right.
Like, that's the fundamental issue here. It's like, don't you want to limit if you believe that? I'm assuming he refers to mass shooters as savage criminals. He's not just talking about like people of color in his race.
Yeah, I was going to say it may. I mean, it's obviously very racially coded terminology that he's using. I mean, we obviously call that Hillary Clinton for talking about super predators. As Michelle Alexander, author of The New Jim Crow, pointed out, it was racially coded rhetoric. It's even more inflammatory here. But so that's a good question. I think it probably does depend on whether they're white, if he calls them savages and hoodlums.
Well, it gets crazier because here is another great clip.
Little Miss Addie, who is almost 2. I want to reassure you, she already has a shotgun and she already has a rifle. And she's got a little pony named Sparkles, too, so the girl is set up.
So that's the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem. Yeah.
Does she ride around Sparkles like guns ablaze?
Great question. And does Sparkles have a gun? How about Sparkles?
That's a good question, yeah.
But also, it's like, okay, so she's talking about a 2-year-old, right? In a different circumstance, wouldn't that maybe trigger a visit from Child Services?
Right.
If somebody was openly bragging that their 2-year-old has a rifle and a shotgun?
Yeah, their 2-year-old. And Miss Addie is her granddaughter, by the way.
I mean, I don't know. If that wasn't the governor of a state, I just think that in a different circumstance, somebody might be paying them a visit to like see what's up with that.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe she just outed herself.
To our fans who like guns and I don't want to knock your right to carry and your interest in guns. It's just and I realize we're sending me like some coastal liberals here, but come on, I mean. You have to brag about a 2-year-old having a
I think we can all agree that 2-year-olds shouldn't be packing heat. I mean, maybe I'm really out of touch. I could be out of touch and a coastal elite. So forgive me if I am, but I think that's something we can share.
A poll conducted before the Louisville and Nashville shootings showed 63% of Americans are dissatisfied with the nation's gun laws. But a majority of Republicans, 54%, are satisfied. And so far, that overall dissatisfaction number hasn't translated to the ballot box. Not a single pro-gun elected politician has been thrown out over the issue. But that's not true on abortion. Nowhere is the gap between the Republican base and the overall general electorate greater than on this issue, particularly after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. On Friday, the Supreme Court put a temporary hold on a lower court ruling on the abortion pill, while the court considers the Biden administration's request to preserve FDA approval of the drug. The state keeps the abortion pill widely available for now, with perhaps another decision expected by Wednesday to try to clear some of this up. Of course, in theory, with the Dobbs decision, the court thought it was sending abortion.
Totally functional country, very healthy. So this one judge can cite laws from whatever
1800s,
1800s, to stop a widely available abortion pill that was approved by the FDA in the market for 20 years or something like that. And then now another court can intervene, and there's access to it for a couple of days until a new decision. Very, very healthy.
Yeah. Stock up on these pills, ladies and gentlemen.
Back to the states. Clearly, that is not the case. The Dobbs decision is not popular with the public. While 61% of voters disapproved of the court's decision to overturn Roe in a fall NBC News poll, 69% of Republicans approved of it. Republican elected leaders are well aware of the political challenges abortion presents right now. In 2024, presidential hopefuls have struggled to answer simple questions about where they stand on abortion rights and access. This week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis quickly signed a 6-week abortion ban before a speech at Evangelical Liberty University. But he did it behind closed doors, and then he never mentioned what he did in his speech. Donald Trump has repeatedly refused to say whether he would even support a federal law that would restrict abortion. And you'll hear Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, even Mike Pence, all of them are struggling to define their views on this issue.
Is it encouraging a culture of life, though, to propose the death penalty for women who get abortions?
I must tell you that I don't I'm not familiar with those proposals, and I don't have a way of responding to that or confirming it.
Why can't you respond to something? Can't you say, yeah, I would be opposed to the death penalty for abortion?
Because he hasn't worked it out.
He hasn't worked it out. Yeah, he hasn't questioned. He hasn't asked Mother, his wife.
These are the tough moral decisions that we elect people to solve for us, because it's very complicated. So should someone die or not for having an abortion? So we need Mike Pence to make that decision for us.
Right.
If he needs time to weigh in on that, hey,
he has to pray on it.
Yes, he has to pray.
Before you weigh in on it, you got to pray on it.
That's right.
Sign the most conservative pro-life legislation that they can get through Congress.
Even if it was 6 weeks.
I'm not going to talk about 6 or 5 or 7 or 10.
I don't want unelected justices deciding something this personal. We're not going to let this be a political football. Let's let the states work this out. If Congress decides to do it, but don't get into that game of them saying how many weeks. No, let's first figure out what we agree on.
Which is making it a political football.
Yeah.
Nikki. I love I don't want unelected judges to get involved in this, but I would like people who are not medical professionals to weigh in on FDA decisions. I definitely trust non-doctors with fierce ideologies to determine what is safe or unsafe.
Yeah, and Ron DeSantis, I mean, he got into the whole thing about weeks because he just signed the law banning abortion after 6 weeks.
Right. Yeah. It's really ridiculous. But I mean, there's a poll that was done. I think 70% of Americans want the mifepristone to stay available. So that's probably, and people don't want, I mean, abortion, it depends on the way you frame it. That's the problem so often, which is that the way you ask it determines the outcome.
Well, as Nikki Haley says, it's not about the people, it's about the states. It's about what the states want.
Right.
And not the people in those states, but the lawmakers in those states, if they're Republican.
Yeah.
States' rights. That's what that means.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the news of the week, or a big piece of news this week, which Chuck didn't mention, was the arrest of the leaker, this young man in the Army who was accused of being the leaker of all of these classified secrets. Jack Texera, who was arrested this week in Massachusetts. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was among a small group of people in Congress, maybe even the only person, to defend him and said that he did a public service. Well, her Republican colleague, Lindsey Graham, is not happy about that.
You mentioned that as you mentioned, that there are some on the right that are not only sugarcoating it, but actually applauding him. Yeah. I mean, take a look at what Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted. She said, Jack Teixeira is white, male, Christian, and anti-war. That makes him an enemy to the Biden regime. And he told the truth.
Really quick question. So if he were a woman of color and anti-war, would he be an ally of the Biden administration? Just curious. Woman of color, Muslim or Jew?
Truth about troops being on the ground in Ukraine and a lot more. I mean, Tucker Carlson's kind of turning him into a hero. What do you make of that? Why?
What they're suggesting will destroy America's ability to defend itself. That it's okay to release classified information based on your political views, that the ends justify the means. It is not okay. If you're a member of the military intelligence community and you disagree with American policy and you think you're going to be okay when it comes to leaking classified information, you're going to go to jail. It's one of the most irresponsible statements you can make. The ability for America to gather intelligence from human resources on the ground has been compromised. We can't have a chaotic intelligence gathering system. If you give us information and it's disclosed, you can lose your life.
Okay, what is that? Is that a threat, or is he just describing what can happen?
I think he's talking about how, disclosures like this threaten U.S. sources around the world, even though none of these documents so far have done that at all.
Right, and they always say that, right? Like they say that with Snowden. They
say it with Snowden, even though Snowden, even though like only a small fraction of what Snowden took has been actually released, because the journalists he gave this to have all taken care not to release any sensitive information that get people killed. And same with Julian Assange. They said it about him too.
Yeah, exactly.
But Julian Assange talked to the State Department.
Right. There's audio of that.
And offered to help them redact documents.
Right.
So that's also a lie about that's used to smear Assange as well.
Right. In fact, Hillary didn't even he couldn't get through to Hillary's team. He kept trying to talk to them because there was someone who was rogue, basically, and he was warning them that there were going to be documents leaked that he wasn't, or released that he wasn't releasing. And you can hear them being very non-responsive.
Yeah.
The way we gather intelligence protects our country. There are military members serving today from Georgia and other places who are less safe because of what this airman did. There is no justification for this, and for any member of Congress to suggest it's okay to leak classified information because you agree with the cause is terribly irresponsible and puts America in serious danger.
So what's interesting, by the way, about the coverage of these leaks is that we're going to show a bunch of clips, and there are even more clips that we're not showing because we didn't want to keep showing the same thing again and again. But something that you don't see in this discussion is what actually was revealed in these leaks.
I know, because the media doesn't care about the content of these really sensitive documents, telling the truth about U.S. policy abroad, including in Ukraine. They don't care because they're in lockstep with the administration. Their only concern is, how did this happen? How did these secrets get out? And are we going to sufficiently punish the leaker? That is their concern. Glenn Greenwald had on his show, he had some excerpts of a Pentagon news conference where the reporters are all acting as superior officers, harassing the Pentagon spokesperson. How did this happen? What are you going to do to put measures in place to prevent this from happening again? Nobody wants to talk about what these leaks actually show.
Right.
There's been a lot to come out, but among the most interesting revelations to me is that, in public, the Biden administration is saying that Ukraine is ready for a counteroffensive. They're on the march. But in private, the Pentagon is assessing that Ukraine's army is seriously depleted, and they're calling into question how much territory, if any, Ukraine can recapture in a counteroffensive, which again speaks to the fundamental point that we've made often on this show, which is that why are we fueling this war rather than calling for diplomacy, especially given that it's confirmed that there's a private recognition that Ukraine can't achieve much more. So basically, the only reason to keep the war going would just be to fund a continued stalemate. So basically, bleed more Russians, but also bleed Ukraine in the process too. So basically, fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, which is exactly the point that we made on the show for a long time. So the documents do provide new evidence of that, and they don't want to talk about that because they're all on board with the proxy war.
Right, it'd be politically inconvenient. But yeah, it is sick. I mean, it's the U.S. basically is open about wanting to bleed Russia. They're not open about the fact that when you bleed Russia, the collateral damage is also bleeding Ukrainians.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Okay, well, let's go to Jen Psaki. She is the former White House press secretary, slid over to a role at hosting a show on MSNBC. And here's her take on this story.
There has been a lot in the news lately about classified information ending up in places it shouldn't be. Of course, we've all heard about the classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago last year. We've seen pictures. But just this week, we all followed the mad scramble to find the source behind the leak of highly classified materials, in large part about the war in Ukraine. Was it a foreign actor, someone trying to influence the outcome of the war, or was it a whistleblower with an agenda? We didn't know. It turns out it wasn't a self-styled whistleblower or a foreign spy, at least not according to the reporting we have so far. It was a 21-year-old IT worker with the Air National Guard who was trying to impress some friends he met on the internet. Jack Teixeira, who was arrested by the...
By the way, I haven't looked into this aspect, and maybe all this is true, that's what his motive was, but you never really know what someone's motive is until you actually hear from them. Right. So, I remember when Edward Snowden surfaced, there was a huge effort to disparage him, and the way they did it is they found some old posts he made in a chat room where he sounded kind of stupid or whatever. And that was used to characterize him. So maybe that is the case here, that that's really what this guy was doing. He just wanted to impress his friends, but I wouldn't assume that until we actually hear from him.
Yeah, good point.
The FBI on Thursday shared dozens of classified documents on a small private group chat, literally named Thug Shaker Central. Can't make it up sometimes. A forum of mostly young men in their teens who had bonded over video games, guns, and racist memes. Of course, it was only a matter of time before those materials were disseminated more widely on Twitter. That's what happened. As a former government official, as I was watching all of this, it was pretty striking to see official documents like that strewn across social media platforms. Whatever Jack Teixeira's motive was, a leak like this is bad for the government. It's bad for the country. For one, national security leaks can compromise sources and methods. Basically means it puts real people at risk who are out there in the field. And it also makes it harder to recruit new sources who we can get information from. Second, it's never good when our adversaries know what we have and know what we know. And third, it can hurt our alliances, making it harder for our intelligence partners to trust us, who we share a lot of information with.
That's because these documents show, in part, that we're spying on them.
Right. And we're lying.
Yeah. Which, like, literally, I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise, but the documents show they're spying on Zelensky. They're spying on South Korea. We're spying on all of our allies.
Right.
And so that's why it makes it harder for us to form alliances when our partners realize that they're being spied on, which probably they know anyway.
It is awkward. Yeah.
It is awkward when it comes out publicly.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, it's a bad look for the country that classified information could be shared by a 21-year-old kid who simply wanted to show off. But you know what else is a bad look? When a 76-year-old former president is suspected of doing something pretty similar.
What if how old Biden is, 80-year-old president is also suspected of doing something similar too?
Talk.
Listen, that's why, and for everyone's wondering why we set such a long clip of Jen Psaki giving a seminar on leaking. That was the kicker. It's like, let's find a way to take this back to Trump.
Right. Nice setup.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yes. So this is all. How can we go from these leaks and ignore what they say to talking about Donald Trump and his documents, and of course in the process not talking about Joe Biden and his documents, because Biden's has the same controversy too over mishandling classified documents.
Right. It's the "but Trump" refrain.
Yes.
Which Dems love.
All right. Well, okay. Let's go to Meet the Press.
Committees are going to want some pound of flesh here, aren't they?
Yeah, my sources on the Intel committees in Congress are saying that this is absolutely going to be an issue. There's going to be an all-senator classified briefing when they return this week, in the middle of the week. And the intelligence committees have a lot of questions. Not only why do so many people have access to classified information, and what sort of fallout is there from this? They want to know not what President Biden says, but what the Intelligence Committee is saying, what the fallout is going to be. So this is going to be an issue, but this has also been an issue when there have been leaks before, after the Snowden issue. And Jay, you know better. I'm not sure how much change there has been in the classified complex since after each one, but Congress is going to focus on this.
The classified complex. I like that.
Again, this is what our so-called journalists focus on when the leaks exposing government secrets come out, not what the leaks contain, but how can we stop this from happening again? Right. That's their chief concern.
How many ways can you talk about this without talking about what's in them? It's really unbelievable. I'm actually impressed.
Okay, well, let's keep the party going. Mike Turner, he is the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. He's got thoughts.
Do you have any sense yet of the scale of the damage caused by the leak of this classified material by apparently this 21-year-old airman who has been arrested?
Again, this is all snitch journalism.
Right.
It's all, what is the damage of the documents being released? How can we stop it from happening again? Not like, hey, the documents show that you're lying to us about this proxy war that you've spent more than $100 billion on, that's fueling conflict with the nuclear power. And shouldn't this maybe be a time for diplomacy? It doesn't even cross these people's minds.
Right. Well, you know how usually when you ask questions like that, you're being a Putinist? Well, in this case, you're being a 21-year-old.
Yeah, you're a gamer.
Yeah.
Immature.
Yeah.
Not completely, but clearly there's damage that's done. I mean, we have documents classified because we don't want them to get in the hands of our adversaries, and these have been widely circulated. So,
and their adversaries include the public,
right,
who is paying for all of their foreign adventures, and they don't want the public to know about the reality of things like the war in Ukraine. That's really who their main adversary is.
Obviously, these are damaging both the United States and to our allies. You know, what's troubling here is, when you look at the documents that were circulated, that without the care of its handling, these relate to actual real people. The marks on maps are real people, and they can impact people's lives, and that's certainly our concern.
Right.
Mike Turner just wants to protect human life.
Yeah.
By continuing to fund a proxy war that is killing tens of thousands of people.
Right.
That's his concern. It's just protecting human life.
Right. With no Ukrainian victory in sight.
Leak
It's
itself.
true. You know,
on the leak.
Like in all the clips that we reviewed, maybe we missed something. There was nothing. There's not one question about the content.
Right.
And if there is a question, it's always about a content that's self-serving to the U.S. government narrative.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like the Washington Post has an article out now, which is about how it says, the headline is, Russians boasted that just 1% of fake social profiles are caught, leak shows. So this is apparently from a new batch of leaks, which I don't know, I find odd. But anyway, assuming that this comes from the same batch, this is like a narrative used to reinforce the fact that we're not sufficiently monitoring social media, and we're letting the Russians get away with like hiding themselves on social media, which means effectively that's a call for more censorship. So the self-serving leaks are getting more attention, but not the ones that undermines
the media political revolving door agenda.
Yep.
On the leak itself, the individual who is accused here, Mr. Teixeira, there's video that's circulated of him saying racist things, shooting guns, anti-Semitic things. He's apparently posted these things on social media, and they were there undetected for a long period of time. What part of this needs to change? Because clearly the protocols failed.
Right, absolutely. And if you look at the actual complaint and affidavit that was filed when he was arraigned, you have the also admission from the Department of Defense that they are able to track his movements. So clearly he was having access to documents that he should not have had access to. And someone should have been paying attention, tapping him on the shoulder and ending that access. But in this instance, as you just indicated, through life patterns, there were clearly signals that he might be a likely leaker of information in the future. And then also the access that he was having to this information should have been cut off. He should have never been having access to this level of classified information that could hurt the United States.
But he was working basically in tech support. It wasn't necessarily analyzing this information.
Right, he had no reason, there was no need to know for him of the information that he was accessing. And the Department of Defense admits in the affidavit that they had the ability to track him. That's going to be the questions my committee is going to be having. So we're going to be having hearings on this. And what we need to do, and from the 9/11 Commission, we learned that we needed to more widely disseminate classified information so that people had actionable intelligence that they could piece together puzzles. Clearly, we've gone too far. And where we have an instance where someone in Massachusetts who's looking at documents with respect to war plans in Ukraine, and the Department of Defense knows, and that's what our committee is going to be looking at, is how do we make certain that we make changes?
Kind of, all right, like more monitoring.
It's all snitch talk. It's all how can we stop this from happening again? Not what does it say about the policy that we're pursuing.
Right, nothing about that, yeah.
Let me show you one clip. This is a really interesting tweet that was deleted by David Phillips, a reporter at the New York Times. Great reporter, by the way. Remember that story from a year back or so about how the U.S. killed a bunch of civilians in Syria, had it on tape, and then just hid the video, concealed it? It was like a massacre. So that was him. So he's a good reporter, and he admitted something that I thought was very revealing, which he then deleted. But here's the clip. This is what he said.
Why is he deleting?
He says and then click on the picture, Wilson, so we have it full screen. He says the New York Times worked feverishly, and let's try to show that picture full screen. The New York Times worked feverishly to find, worked feverishly to find the guy leaking top secret documents on Discord. Ironically, if the same guy had leaked to the New York Times, we'd be working feverishly to conceal it. So basically, he's saying that if this guy had leaked to the Times, they'd be doing all they could to protect them because that's their source. Because he leaked this somewhere else, they thought it was okay to help try to find his identity and to uncover him, which is just really weird. I can't recall an instance where the media has been involved in trying to out a source, even if it wasn't their own source. And that speaks to, you know, this new era we're in, where snitch media is acceptable, to the point where the New York Times even worked with Bellingcat, which is a NATO state-funded website, which of course they don't acknowledge that Bellingcat is NATO state-funded, but they are. And you know, I've had my own entanglements with them over the whole Syria story, but they work with Bellingcat to find the leaker, to identify him. And after they did, he was arrested. Now, maybe the government was already on the case anyway and didn't need the New York Times' help, but just the fact that the Times is engaging in an effort to find the leaker, and this Times reporter is admitting that had he been their source, they wouldn't have done that. They'd be trying to protect him. I mean, that speaks to just what a strange moment we're in, where the media acts as an arm of the state and is open about it.
Right. Yeah. And then he had to delete that tweet because it lacked nuance. What's the nuance, I wonder, that it lacked?
It was too honest. That's what it lacked.
It lacked like obfuscation and sugarcoating. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's head back to the issue of abortion.
Yeah.
And here's a summary of the latest in the aftermath of this Texas ruling.
The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year. The court said that the legal status of abortion should not be determined by unelected judges. As Justice Samuel Alito wrote in the majority's opinion, quote, "It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives." Nearly a year later, the court is once again at the center of the national debate over abortion, in a position to determine the fate of the most common form of abortion in the United States, the abortion pill, mifepristone. The pill has been legally available for some 23 years, but a decision by a federal judge in Texas aimed to change that, not just in Texas, but throughout the United States. Justice Alito issued an 11th-hour stay late Friday that will leave the availability of the pill unchanged, but only until Wednesday, as the court decides whether to intervene on lower court rulings that would either curtail access to the drug or make it illegal to manufacture and distribute it. We'll cover all the angles of the fast-moving development in just a few minutes.
Yeah, I think they're just, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I think that they may have realized that this probably is a bad PR move. I'm thinking maybe they think that this guy overstepped, this Texas judge, and they probably, I mean, we'll see what happens, because again, something I said last Monday is that if there's anything we've learned about the Supreme Court, it's that it does things that we thought were like beyond the pale. But I'm thinking maybe this is something that they realize will be provoke too much of a backlash, and they don't want to have to rule on it. So they're kind of buying some time.
Yeah. Well, to your point, here is a Republican member of Congress, Nancy Mace, admitting just that the positions that her party is taking are really extreme.
Right. And she was ironically, our Democrat stock was showing how a Republican was being more logical on this in some ways, or being more unequivocal in condemning this ruling than the Biden administration.
We need to find a middle ground on this issue. And I have a great pro-life voting record, but some of the stances we've taken, especially when it comes to rape and incest, protecting the life of the mother, it's so extreme. The middle, the independent voters, right of center, left of center, they cannot support us. And again, I represent a purple district. I talked to a voter the other day, and she left the Republican Party over this issue. She's an independent voter. She's pro-choice. Her gestational limits, for example, are at 14 weeks. I'm a pro-life legislator. I'm at 15 to 20 weeks. And so there's a lot of middle ground. I think it's important in how we talk about these issues and offer solutions. We've got 14 counties in South Carolina that don't have a single OBGYN doctors. So if we're going to ban abortion, what are we doing to make sure women have access to birth control? What are we doing about how do we improve adoption services in our country? What about the kids that are not wanted? What about our foster care system? What about getting nurses that can treat women who need, OBGYN care in those rural areas? What are we doing about getting birth control over the counter at pharmacies? There are a lot of things that we can do to protect life and not alienate the independent voter.
Okay,
and that's what Susan B. Anthony's list misses.
Okay, and to my
And that Susan B. Anthony's list is a very anti-choice organization. By the way, yeah. So that's interesting because now what's notable about Mace is that she herself is a survivor of rape. She was raped when she was younger. So I think that gives her a kind of empathy. But besides that, I think she's just being politically savvy. Like she's realizing that this is beyond even quote unquote pro-life people's kind of tolerance.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens next. Kind of crazy world out there. What do we got next? We got more abortion news. Let's hear from Senator Baldwin, Democrat of Wisconsin.
Let me start with the Supreme Court's decision to put a temporary hold on the ruling having to do with mifepristone and the future of medicated abortion in this country. Do you think 5 days is enough time for the Supreme Court to get all the information they need in order to make this decision?
Well, who knows how long that will take, but I'm certainly glad for the 5 days. But look, what we have in Texas is a judge who was not guided by science, but is part of a extreme Republican concerted effort to ban abortion nationwide. And we do not need judges, politicians, or government telling women about what sort of health care they can have. It is an issue that is not only playing out in the court in Texas, but in the state of Florida with the governor signing a near 6-week ban, Idaho forbidding travel out of state for minors, Wisconsin, where we've gone back to literally 1849. That is the date our criminal abortion ban was passed, and that's 174 years ago. We are fighting back.
All right. Well, let's see if they're fighting back. It's certainly what they say. It's one of the things that Democrats constantly use to justify voting for them.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. And someone who's on the opposite side is Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican.
He's always a good time.
He's always a good time. And he seems to have some conflicting views on the power of states versus the power of the federal government.
I think Dobbs is the uncomfortable middle ground, where people will confront that there's a diversity of opinion, and no one group has the ability to impose their will upon the other. Dobbs, I think, was the correct decision.
Are you going to vote against any attempt at creating a federal standard?
By the way, Dobbs, of course, was the Supreme Court opinion that basically overturned Roe v. Wade.
Considering that you believe this goes back to the states, whether it's any attempt, whether it's a 20-week, at one time you had supported a 20-week bill. Would you ever be open to that, or do you think at this point always leave it to the states?
So what Chuck Todd is doing there is Chuck Todd is pointing out that he in the past has supported things that were federal as much as he's trying to praise states' rights. He's pointing out that he has supported federal bans. And you know, a sign that you are stalling is when you say the same thing you said a couple seconds ago that adds no significance to what you're saying. So let's hear what he has to say.
States.
First, I think that the Dobbs decision is a correct decision. You can give me
He just said that. So first, let's just remind him of that.
Theoreticals all day long. You surely can. I'm pro-life, by the way. I am pro-life. But the fact is you're going to need 60 votes to get something through the Senate. What Tammy Baldwin was just talking about, there could be no restrictions in the states upon abortion, meaning that a child could be coming through the birth canal and could still be aborted. Is that right? No, it's wrong. And most Americans think that is wrong.
That's not actually a thing, that like during the birth that they will abort a baby. They're saying that because they know that's a really gross image. And if that ever happened, that doesn't happen. But if anything were happening like that, it would be because there'd be a major medical emergency. But that just doesn't happen. I shouldn't even say that. It doesn't happen at all. Yeah. That's such a ridiculous thing to say. And as optimism of the will point out, way to avoid the question. Yeah.
The fact is, Tammy will not get that through the Senate.
Like as if she's trying to get that through the Senate. Like, hi, I'd like to get through the Senate a bill that allows babies to be aborted while they're being born. Now, what could happen is that there could be some. I don't even want to get into it, but yeah.
There's not 60 votes for allowing that. On a bipartisan basis, it's already been rejected. So I kind of reject giving me theoretical after theoretical.
It's not a theoretical because he already expressed his support of a federal ban.
Because I mean, that's what you do if you want to fill airtime and get people buzzing. But it's not how we actually govern.
And he just gave an insane theoretical himself.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
You know, of something that would never ever happen. That's as theoretical as it could get.
Yeah.
And but what he seems to be saying is that he supports states' rights, but also he's open to some sort of federal legislation if it goes his way.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
How convenient.
Well, yeah. Okay. Well, another really charming figure was also interviewed by Chuck Todd. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu. He is the Prime Minister of Israel for life. He's been around forever. He keeps getting back in. And here he is in a friendly interview with the Chuckster.
Has weighed in. President Biden has weighed in, concerned about the judicial reform. Do you believe this is impacting U.S.-Israeli relations?
No, I don't. I think President Biden has been a great friend of Israel. I've known him for 40 years, from the time he was a senator, through vice president, through president. I know his commitment to Israel's security. Friends can have disagreements on occasion, but I share with him the view that we should act, not only share the view, I'm actually acting on it, to try to reach a broad consensus as possible. I want to tell you one thing, Chuck.
Yes.
When I compare the degree of coordination between Israel and America on security matters, on intel, on cyber, economic cooperation,
yeah.
I mean, there's just no comparison to where this was 27 years ago. Today, I think Israel, I always say America is Israel's indispensable and by far the best ally. But I want to tell you, I don't think you have a better ally in the world than Israel, because Israel has become a great technological power and a great asset to the United States.
Yeah, Netanyahu is such an ally that back when Obama was in office and Obama was pushing through the Iran nuclear deal, Netanyahu, the great ally, came to Congress and delivered a speech trying to undermine Obama and trying to undermine his, one of his signature foreign policy achievements. That's what a great ally Netanyahu is. But he's right in the sense that Israel has long done the U.S.'s dirty work. So, for example, in the 80s, after it started becoming awkward that the Reagan administration was arming death squads in Central America, that job was farmed out to Israel. And Israel did that. And they trained some of these death squads and gave them weapons. There's a great book on that called Dangerous Liaison by Andrew Coburn and his wife, Leslie Coburn.
Right.
And amazingly, they even made a documentary about it that aired on Frontline back then. Imagine that happening today, a documentary on Frontline about, Israel at the U.S. behest arming death squads in Central America. It just wouldn't happen.
Right.
Anyway, that's what Netanyahu is talking about when he's bragging about what a great ally Israel is.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have more Netanyahu.
Yeah. Let's look at a tweet. Given that he's bragging about what close friends they are, let's look at a tweet. that Netanyahu tweeted back in March. Israel's a sovereign country which makes its decisions by the will of its people and not based on pressures from abroad, including from the best of friends. Sounds like frenemy talk to me, honestly, more than best of friends talk. But that's so funny because obviously someone tweeted under that, like, okay, then hold a referendum. Because what Biden is, what Netanyahu is doing with this judicial overhaul is extremely unpopular. So he's kind of trying to do what the U.S. does all the time, which is in some ways outsource opposition, pretending it's like foreigners, in this case, the U.S. government, much like the U.S. pretends that opposition is either comes from or is exploited by or stoked by Russia.
Yeah. And, in this whole interview with Chuck Todd, the plight of Palestinians didn't come up.
Of course not.
Chuck didn't even mention them. Chuck also called Israel the only democracy in the Middle East, which again requires you to ignore that Israel's ruling over millions of Palestinians that it's displaced and occupied,
right,
and denies them the right to vote.
Right.
So, I mean, anyway, that's just par for the course here, and that just shows how. I mean, even though some things have changed in the Democratic Party, like the younger base is a lot more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than the older generation. I mean, the media has not changed at all.
No, has not caught up on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And here's another, speaking of Netanyahu being such a friend of America and Israel and America being such good friends, let's look at this clip that was leaked. It's from 2001. Apparently Netanyahu didn't know he was being filmed at the time. So here he is talking with some people. He goes, the Arabs are currently focusing on a war of terror, and they think it will break us. The main thing, first of all, is to hit them, not just one blow, but blows that are so painful the price will be too heavy to be borne. The price is not too heavy to be borne now. A broad attack on the Palestinian Authority to bring them to the point of being afraid that everything is collapsing. And then someone who he's talking to says, wait a moment, but then the world will say, how come you're conquering again? And Netanyahu says, the world won't say a thing. The world will say, you're defending. Aren't you afraid of the world, Bibi? Someone asks. Especially today with America. And he goes, especially today with America. I know what America is. America is something that can easily be moved to the right direction. They say they're for us, but they won't get in our way. They won't get in our way. They won't get in our way. Okay, so this is interesting because here we have Netanyahu saying that America is something that can be moved. Just openly showing that he's kind of right.
Yeah.
That's the ironic part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What an ally.
What an ally. Yeah. And ADEC, what about Andrew Bamford's reporting on what Bibi did to get Trump elected? Oh, yeah. Dems blame it on Putin, but evidence that it was Bibi. See his Nation article. That's true. That's a good Nation article. Thank you, ADEC, for that. Generous super chat.
Okay. Well, another controversy is the whole thing about Justice Clarence Thomas, found to be receiving, lavish gifts from a billionaire donor. So here is Senator Amy Klobuchar, defender of ethics.
And before you go, Clarence Thomas, we've now had, two sets of revelations from ProPublica. One about the vacations he took with Harlan Crow. We described as a family friend. And now it turns out Harlan Crow bought his mother's house, which he was a part owner of. How serious is this?
Serious. When you have billionaires who are on boards with cases pending before the court, buying a justice's mom's home and renovating it, and then that justice doesn't report it, this isn't even an exception for personal friendships, Jonathan. This is a case where the law clearly says you have to report these things. Yet he reported that same year a medallion he was given from Yale. Another year he reported when he was given tires. But he doesn't report this, and he didn't report the lavish vacations on yachts. It is time for ethics rules in the Supreme Court that are clear and enforceable. I said this the last time I was on with you on this very show, when he wasn't recusing himself from cases pending before the court regarding the insurrection, given his wife's, what we know now about her emails and texts and the like. This should not be a double standard. Every federal judge in the country comes under these ethics rules. So if they don't do it, then the Congress should do it. And that's why we're having a hearing to cover this on the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. And looks like Justice Thomas, I mean, he's going to get away with it. He's untouchable. But this episode was pretty embarrassing for him.
Yeah, the biggest thing, I mean, it seems like it's just a no-brainer with the getting his being flown. There's like a hospitality exception that you don't have to report, like if someone's putting you up somewhere, but you're not allowed to be flown somewhere, and like you can't get a travel worth over a certain amount of money without declaring it. This guy Harlan Crow, you kind of can't make that name up. He sounds like a really interesting guy. He has like this garden of evil with all these dictators, and he has like statues of them, of people he considers to be evil. So like Mao, I believe Mao, he definitely has Stalin. And he has also like Nazi memorabilia, and he has a signed copy of Mein Kampf. Yeah, sounds like a fun guy to visit.
Yeah, you always have to wonder when someone has Nazi memorabilia, and including a signed copy of Mein Kampf. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of Garden of Evil, one guy whose face deserves a place in that garden is Lindsey Graham, who recently visited Saudi Arabia because he's not happy with Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has been acting independently recently, long-time U.S. client state. But recently it's made agreements with Iran. It's talking about restoring ties to Syria. It's increasing trade with China. And the U.S., after vowing to make Saudi Arabia a pariah over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, has been backtracking and trying to make nice with Saudi Arabia because they're realizing that they're losing control of Saudi Arabia. And someone who definitely wants to keep control of Saudi Arabia is Lindsey Graham. So here he is talking about a recent visit to the kingdom.
And Senator, you were just in Saudi Arabia. You met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS as he is known.
Yeah.
But I remember how highly critical you were of him after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist. Let's take a listen to what you had to say back in 2018.
I can never do business with Saudi Arabia again until we get this behind us.
Right. And what does that mean?
That means I'm not going back to Saudi Arabia as long as this guy's in charge. The Crown Prince is a wrecking ball. I think the behavior before the Khashoggi murder was beyond disturbing, and I cannot see him being a reliable partner to the United States.
So you said he was beyond toxic. You would never return to Saudi while he was in charge. So what happened? What changed?
Now, listen, whenever you hear Lindsey Graham complain that someone's not being a reliable partner, you have to wonder what the real reason is. It's not because Saudi Arabia murdered a journalist, Khashoggi, who, and Khashoggi was friendly with U.S. intelligence.
Right.
But that's not the reason, because Lindsey Graham doesn't care about human life. So you have to wonder what really is going on behind all this. And I suspect that already back then, MBS, I'm just speculating here, that MBS was already showing signs of being independent, of doing the kinds of things he's doing now, which is like restoring ties with Iran and talking about readmitting Syria to the Arab League. And that's what must have gotten Lindsey Graham very, very upset, because it couldn't have just been about this one person's death. And by the way, the circumstances around that death are very, very strange. Like the fact that it was in the Turkish embassy, they had a recording of it. It was like all on tape. It's weird. And I don't have any theories about what this real story is, but it's just strange. And it's like the fact that the U.S. is so upset with a longtime client state, it can't just be over the killing of one person, because they support Saudi Arabia killing masses of people inside Yemen, for example. So,
or inside their own nation, inside their own country.
Sure. Yeah. So here's Lindsey Graham about his recent visit.
Right. Well, a couple things happened. Number one, I've been talking with the Biden administration about working with Saudi Arabia to build on the reforms they're doing in their country and to build on the Abraham Accords. If you get nothing else out of this interview, things in Saudi Arabia are changing very quickly for the better. I see a chance to normalize the relationship between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel that would be transformative for the region. Saudi Arabia purchased $36 billion worth of 787 Boeing jets made in Charleston, South Carolina. They picked the Boeing 787 over the Airbus. I came over here to say thanks to Saudi Arabia. They're thinking about buying more jets, and I also came over to caution them about getting too cozy with China and Iran. But Vision 2030 of the Crown Prince is real.
All right, so there it is. That's why he's there, because there's an opportunity to thank them for buying weapons.
Right, and all right.
And he wants to give them a warning too about like don't get too cozy with Iran and China, and that made him change his mind.
Right. It's a thank you and a by the way, I'm going to warn you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But good for him for being honest. Good for him for being honest.
I know. It reminds me of when Trump, it's funny. It's something about Saudi Arabia provokes some honesty in people. Remember Trump said that they didn't do anything about Khashoggi because they just bought a bunch of weapons from us?
Exactly.
Women can drive for the first time in modern Saudi history. Women can go out to dinner without a male escort. His vision for the country economically is transformative. $1 trillion is going to be spent to modernize Saudi Arabia. I'd like to be part of that transition. What I saw in Saudi Arabia was a game changer for me. I want to build on the progress, but I want to have an honest, candid relationship. There are things that need to change in Saudi Arabia. But Jonathan, the ability to work with Saudi Arabia is at an all-time high. If we could normalize relationships with Saudi Arabia and then with Israel, build upon the Abraham Accords, it'd be the biggest change in my lifetime regarding Mideast security and America's security.
All right, so that's what he's holding out hope for too, is that, Saudi Arabia has been opening up toward Israel, and they want to keep that process going. And if there are relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, that undermines the axis of states that resist Israel, Iran, Syria, and their ally Hezbollah. And it's easier for Israel to crush the Palestinians because they have even less Arab support than they currently have, which is not very high. So that's what Lindsey Graham's going for, and he's holding out hope.
Right, he's a hopeful man. I guess he was wrong. He underestimated MBS.
That's
what a trustworthy partner he would be.
Yeah, I guess they hoped back then that like if enough people turned on MBS that he would be overthrown.
Right,
but that didn't happen. So now they got to work with them, I guess, until they can find somebody else who's more compliant. All right. Well, speaking of regime change, there are growing calls for Senator Dianne Feinstein to step down because she's been MIA. She's 89 years old.
She's missed a lot of votes.
Yeah. Recently sold one of her properties in Colorado for like $26 million. So she's doing well financially, but she's been missing a lot of votes. And so there have been calls for her to step down because unless she's there, they can't even confirm some new judicial nominees. But here is one of her defenders, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, saying that it's her call.
Time for her to step down?
Dianne Feinstein is an extraordinary senator, and she's been a role model and a mentor to me my entire career. I sit with her on the Intelligence Committee. She asks some of the most searing, pointed questions of anyone on that committee. Her legacy.
And those questions include, what's your name again?
Yeah, right.
Which is apparently because there have been reports that she doesn't even know the names of her own aides. She has to. She forgets who they are.
And her depth of experience is valuable. And we've had so many senators who have had illnesses, whether it's Mitch McConnell's illnesses or senators who have had strokes. These are issues that we're human, and we believe that a senator should be able to make their own judgments.
She's obviously throwing Fetterman under the bus there, or it's a dig at Fetterman who had a stroke.
About when they're retiring and when they're not, and they all deserve a chance to get better and come back to work. Dianne will get better. She will come back to work, and she's already told Senator Schumer that he can replace her on the Judiciary Committee if it's urgent for these hearings for judges. She's a team player, and she's an extraordinary member of the Senate. It's her right. She's been voted by her state to be senator for 6 years. She has the right, in my opinion, to decide when she steps down.
Well, we actually have a contrary view to that. Let's hear what Ro Khanna had to say. Unless, Aaron, do you want to say something about that?
Well, only that Dianne Feinstein supported the war in Iraq. That's when I think about all these legacy senators. That's the vote that I always come back to, and she supported that. So
Maybe she's already losing it then. That would be the only redeeming thing. Well, let's hear what Ro had to say on Fox
what you did this
News.
week that's making a lot of headlines. You've taken heat for saying that Senator Dianne Feinstein should resign after weeks of being out for medical care. You also responded to a tweet. Somebody was criticizing you about that, and you said it's just common sense and added this. There's no job I know of where you can just continue to not show up and people think that's perfectly fine. We live in a democracy. The people are the boss. Now, Senator Fetterman has been out longer than she has. Is your concern just about her, or would you say it also applies to him as well?
Well, only in Washington would you get criticized for saying something so obvious. I have a lot of respect for Senator Feinstein, but she's missed 75% of votes this year. She hasn't been showing up, and she has no intention. We don't know if she's even going to show up. She has no return date. In contrast, Senator Fetterman has said that he's going to show back up on April 17th. So it's one thing to take medical leave and come back. It's another thing where you're just not doing the job. The reality here is there's the sense, well, you need to have a deference to these senators who've served so long. How about a deference to the American people? How about an expectation that if you sign up to do one of these jobs, you show up?
Okay, so a number of folks out there have said it's ageism, it's sexism, but it may be also a political opportunism issue for you. I want to read something that Kimberly Strassel wrote in the Wall Street Journal. She says, don't think Mr. Khan is motivated entirely by civic-mindedness. Governor Gavin Newsom has vowed to appoint a black woman to Ms. Feinstein's seat should she step down before her term ends in 25. Mr. Khan happens to be co-chairman of House Republican Barbara Lee's campaign for the seat. Ms. Lee is an obvious top contender for a placeholder pick, which would give her a huge leg up over rivals in 2024. So your response to those who say this is a political situation for you more than a concern for the country?
Well, I'm very proud to be a co-chair of Barbara Lee's campaign, one of the strongest anti-war voices in the Congress who's opposed to these foreign interventions. But Governor Newsom can appoint a caretaker. He doesn't have to appoint someone in the current race, and I would support the governor doing that. This has nothing to do with the current race because a caretaker would solve that. This has to do with someone who's just not showing up, and I said out loud what people have been saying in private. And this is how the Beltway works. They don't like it when you call out someone who is in power, and that's why people are unlikely to do it. But, you know, we've had so many calls from the American people, and they say, yeah, it's right. If you're going to sign up to do these jobs, show up.
Well, I will say to get somebody on the record in this town where there's a lot of whispering is always an interesting development. Congressman Khanna, thank you for being with us this week.
You know what?
Thank you so much.
I think Ro was emboldened by coming on our show. I think that's what gave him the confidence to go on the record. Yeah.
I mean, we acknowledged him for coming on and facing some critical questions, which no other progressive member of Congress will do when it comes to their support for sanctions on global South countries or the proxies war in Ukraine. And Ro Khanna answered those questions, and you know, maybe our encouragement emboldened him to speak out about Dianne Feinstein. Who knows?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. By the way, before we leave, I got to just give a little update on Roger Waters. By the way, as I told people, I'm putting a link to this petition. He delivered an injunction against the Frankfurt government and the venue that canceled his concert. I've talked about this a bunch. We're almost at 35,000 signatures. We got 34,704. So all we need is 300 people. We'll be at 35,000. The good news is that Frankfurt has not responded. So fingers crossed. That means they're not going to go forward with the cancellation. We'll see. But we definitely need all the people that we can to sign this petition and tell Germany that they should not cancel performers who have criticized Israel.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, go Roger. And
yeah,
if you're in Europe, see that show if you can.
Yeah, it's great.
It's an amazing show.
Yeah.
He's touring right now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is that it for us for this week?
Yeah, that's it for us. So, guys, the good news is the party keeps going on. We'll see you at Callin right now. And don't forget to subscribe to usefulidiots.substack.com, usefulidiots.locals.com. Rate and review us wherever you find your podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Rumble. How are we in likes? Let's see how we did in likes when I didn't chastise people. Where are we?
We hit 1,000.
Wow. All right. Almost halfway there. Almost. I mean, probably if I chastised, we would have been higher than that. But still, it's not that bad. All right. So see you all on Callin.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.